Beck.
So I have been looking for someone that is willing to go on record and teach me what the heck is happening in the world of Catholicism. What is happening with this Pope, and how is he? What is he doing? What is he doing? Who is he? There's been some speculation from the very beginning that he might be a little hostile towards capitalism and the Western way of doing things. I think that has proven to be pretty accurate. He has recently been said to deny the existence of hell, which is kind of big in the Catholic doctrine. He came out this weekend, then said, let's get rid of all weapons and then we can all live in peace. I'm also concerned because I have heard that he is becoming cozy with Putin and Russia. More disturbing is that he has become close with China and is actually, as I understand it, undermining the underground church. Because there's two churches. There's the church that the government approves, and then the underground bishops, and they are the ones that are doing all the heavy lifting and getting Christians to safety who are actually making a difference. And it's my understanding that he is taking that apart. So we've been looking around, and Michael Matt is the editor of the Remnant newspaper. It's the oldest Catholic newspaper in the country. And he has some of the same questions. So as a practicing Catholic, we thought he would be good to answer some of these questions. Welcome to the program, Michael.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Pleasure to be here.
Sure. So, first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself, so we know that that you're not just an anti-Catholic kind of guy.
Oh, right. No, absolutely. I'm a tradition-minded Catholic, which means I really support and accept all the teachings of the Church. I'm a father of 7 children. We're the type, Glenn, who never miss Mass on Sunday and all the rest. So What's happening in the Church right now is extremely distressing, not only to us, but to a lot of faithful Catholics. And we're trying to make heads or tails out of it, too, at this point.
So I don't even know where to begin with this, but I know that you reported on the conclave, and you say that this Pope's election was even suspect.
Well, yes, it's a suspect may be the wrong word. It's incredibly unprecedented. So the way things happened, the way Pope Benedict abdicated very suddenly, right mid-stride, when he had so much that he was planning on doing and still working on, including an unfinished encyclical and so forth, to suddenly abdicate under those circumstances was just very bizarre, not only for Catholics, but for everyone who's watching, and for historians who have followed this over the years. It was very strange, and the haste with which Jorge Bergoglio was selected just had many of us kind of saying, what? Where did this come from? What happened? Who is this guy? and so, but it's really important, for all of us, for Catholics. I think there's a lot of ignorance out there about, what does this mean? Is it possible for a Catholic Pope to not be the greatest guy, to not be a saint, to fall, to make mistakes? And I think that's where a lot of non-Catholics, they have a misunderstanding of what we mean by the inerrancy or the papal infallibility. In other words, it's possible, Glenn, as you know, to have a terrible pope, to have a pope who's a sinner. We've had terrible popes in the past. So what's happening now with Francis is very perplexing, but of course it doesn't shake our faith in the Catholic Church itself, all of which is still there. It's a divine institution. And Francis is on his own here in many things. He's kind of out there with his own opinions, which are not protected, which are not inerrant. And I, as a faithful Catholic, it breaks my heart to say this, but he's doing a very upsetting thing right now by siding with the political left and by really kind of taking it to faithful Catholics.
He is. It's interesting to me because I see him more and more every day. I mean, he's hanging out with really disturbing people. Paul Ehrlich, George Soros. He seems to agree with, and he's almost becoming, in some ways, the anti-John Paul.
No, absolutely. And as you mentioned, this tweet over the weekend where he says we should ban all weapons in order to be peace. And that's right out of John Lennon. Let's give peace a chance. Imagine there's no heaven, there's no hell. A lot of things just seem almost hippie-esque coming from. And of course, he's 82 years old. How much of this is coming right from his mind, and how much of it is part of the sort of Greg Burke, which is an Opus Dei operative who is really doing a lot of PR work for the Vatican right now? How much of that is coming from the official sort of Vatican PR machine? I don't know, but it's very scandalous, and there's a lot of faithful Catholics that just are perplexed by this. I mean, if Pope Francis wants everyone to get rid of weapons, should he start with the Swiss Guard? Should we de-arm the Swiss Guard then? I mean, there's just so much sort of fuzzy liberal, tweets and whatever that he's throwing out there right now that don't seem to be grounded or well thought out.
I want to ask you, because this was brought up to me by a staunch Catholic who said, Glenn, and it's the reason why we're having you on today is we started a search because I didn't know this and I want to understand this. A staunch Catholic came up to me and said, do you realize what the Pope is doing in China? And explained it to me. And I just can't believe that's true. Is it true that the Pope is undermining through his actions of cozying up with the new dictator in China, that he is undermining the underground church?
Well, this is difficult. The situation in China is very tough for anybody to say with any certainty what's going on there. So I guess I would refer to an expert I think most people would accept, and that is Cardinal Joseph Zen, who's the former Bishop of Hong Kong. And he recently accused the Vatican of selling out the church in China. So it's another one of those things where what is going on? Why can't we get clarity on this? For so many years, faithful Catholics, and I mean faithful to dogma and doctrine in China, but also faithful to the Vatican, have been holding the torch, if you will. They've been being persecuted. They've been martyred. They've gone underground. And all of a sudden, the Vatican comes out with Pope Francis at the helm and says, we're going to regularize, we're going to have relations with the Chinese Patriotic Association, which is a communist sort of pseudo-Catholic church. Now, maybe there's some sort of an alliance or some sort of negotiations that are going on that could justify this in a way that you and I, we don't see it yet. But the very strange thing about Pope Francis and the Vatican at the moment is that they don't take the time to explain these things. So it's just another massive scandal, like it was when he said, supposedly, allegedly, that hell doesn't exist. All they had to do was have Pope Francis come out and just reassert that he believes hell does exist, but nothing. They didn't come out and explain that. They came out and said that it was an unfaithful transcription that hit the news, hit the press, the world press, but never did they reaffirm the doctrine of hell and that Francis believes it. So it's this sort of squishy uncertainty, failure to be clear that has not just us, but Catholics all across the world really concerned right now.
But from what I understand, his actions just in China alone are actually starting to shut down the Underground Railroad, if you will, and he's the church is calling everybody in from underground and saying, hey, just come to the official, Catholic, Communist Party church. Is that true?
Well, that is certainly the reports that we are getting. Again, it's difficult to verify these things, but that seems to be what's happening. I know there are several priests and Chinese bishops now who are saying, it's about time that we do this. On the other hand, as I say, Cardinal Zen, he feels that this is a massive betrayal. And I think if you look at the sort of the philosophy behind this, Francis has this new idea, Glenn, and a lot of Catholics are very concerned that doctrine and dogma and that sort of thing really doesn't matter that much, because we are talking about the God of mercy, and everything is merciful now. God would never send anybody to hell. Even if hell exists, no one would ever do that. So he's much more interested, it seems, in unity, in setting up sort of a tenuous unity with all of these various groups and overlooking the things that actually do form obstacles, certainly the doctrinal problems. And he's doing this in China. He's doing this with Protestants and other groups that are non-Catholics. Instead of negotiating fairly or having conversations that are honest, there's a lot of deceit coming out of the Vatican right now, I'm sorry to say.
Tell me about his relationship with Putin and Russia, because that is I mean, for anybody who knows anything about the miracle of Fatima, that's what that was really all about, was the dangers of Russia, and especially in this time period. And he seems to be getting into bed with Russia and Putin.
Yeah, again, it's interesting that you would bring up Fatima, because that's a lot of this that's happening right now was predicted in those very famous apparitions as a public miracle and so forth back in the early 19th and early 20th century, that talked about a great crisis in the church and wars and so forth in the world, as we're seeing. And so the situation with Russia right now is different. It's difficult to quite see what he's doing. I think that Francis's big concern is keeping this sort of European Union, and maybe, not to sound too conspiratorial, but sort of the nascent stages of this so-called New World Order. I think he's very interested in keeping that alive and viable, which is very surprising to faithful Catholics. But his position with Russia, to me, seems a little unclear. I'm not sure if he means some of these things that he's doing with Russia, or if it's more of a case he wants to placate Russia so that Russia will play the game with the George Soros, World Without Borders, European Union, game plan. Again, difficult to say, but certainly unprecedented from a pope to hear some of the things that we're hearing.
Putin is absolutely against he is spending money to stop the European Union, and he is stirring up unrest all throughout Europe. He does not want a strong, united Europe by any stretch of the imagination. So
right.
Where would I don't understand. I think maybe I'm stumbling into what you're feeling every day as a Catholic.
Glenn, it's really, again, this is heartbreaking as a faithful Catholic. I love the Catholic Church. I believe it's the true Church of Jesus Christ, but this is heartbreaking. You don't get clarity. We've never had a pope like this, Glenn. If you look back, as I say, there have been bad popes, there have been sinners, there's been Honorius types, there's been the Borgia popes. So we're used to scandal. But this is something entirely different. If you saw, like during the run-up to the last election, Bernie Sanders and Tim Kaine and these guys just coming and going, along with Jeffrey Sachs and the rest, Paul Ehrlich, as you mentioned, in the Vatican. Well, whatever you think of Trump, Francis is telling the world that Trump is not a Christian and he's a wall builder and he's a problem. So he was willing to get involved with politics, but he was very supportive of the left. And it was just, as a faithful Catholic, again, it left us stunned. So what is happening in the Vatican?
For anybody who doesn't know who Jeffrey Sachs is or Paul Ehrlich, explain why that's disturbing to you.
Well, these are the sustainable development guides. Ehrlich wrote a book called The Population Bomb, which had basically been completely discredited from the time that he had written it years and years ago. But guess who rehabilitated it, and him, the author? The Vatican. So the Vatican invites these men to the Vatican for their various conferences, and of course they sort of cover things up by saying, well, they're not here. These men are not here to talk about doctrine. They're here to talk about science or whatever. But we see through that. So they're rehabilitating people like Paul Ehrlich. They're giving entree to a guy like Jeffrey Sachs. And this is very disturbing because, as you know, the Catholic Church is very strong on the issues of abortion and so forth. Even contraception is a controversial thing that still the Catholic Church teaches against. And yet these gentlemen that you're referring to are talking about using those means to control population.
Yeah.
So how in the world can the Vatican, without causing scandal, invite these people to come in as honored guests and speak about these things without putting themselves at jeopardy or putting themselves at odds, I should say, with millions, billions of faithful Catholics? It just doesn't work.
Michael Matt, the editor of the Remnant newspaper, thank you so much for the conversation. And honestly, thanks to Catholics all around the world, you guys have held the torch of anti-abortion or pro-life, while I think the rest of us have fallen down on the job. It is mainly the Catholics that have kept this alive, and especially with Charlie Gard and Alfie Evans last week, what the Catholics have done on life is nothing short of miraculous, and thank you and all of the Catholics that are doing that. Well,
thanks for saying that, Glenn. And I think that, as a Catholic, I think that most people would agree that if the Catholic Church does lay down the sword, if you will, on the cultural, on the moral questions, not just Catholics, but the entire world is going to suffer for that, because in a sense it always has been sort of the light on the hill, or it has held the bar high. Even if you don't agree with the Church, with the moral teaching of the Church, it does hold the bar high, which benefits all in society. So I think there are a lot of non-Catholics, too, now who are looking at what's happening in the Vatican, and they're growing fearful, because it does seem like the Catholic Church is preparing. Now, this is the human element of the Catholic Church, preparing to surrender on these very important issues to us all. And so, again, we're very concerned, and we hope that people will share their concerns with the folks in the Vatican and other Catholic outlets, because I think there is still time to turn this around. But at this point, Pope Francis, I'm sorry to say, is causing great concern for all of us.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Appreciate it.